Hello, welcome to another thrilling episode of Coffee and Propaganda. I'm Duncan King. This is my little girl Piper.
Hi. I do not understand what's happening. It picked me up and it said,
Anywhere they're salting the sidewalks outside, so the dogs are frightened and they're running up to me and trying to cower behind me because they're hearing people and it's freaking them out. In this episode, we will talk about gun control. And gun control is a dilemma, is my specific stance on that. The currently the American public has been kind of flipping around on the issue. As you can see from this graph, at one time, 1991, so this is, about within 10 years of the John Lennon shooting and the shooting of Ronald Reagan. The green bar here, the light green bar, is that Americans want gun laws to be more strict. So they were higher at that point, and they've kind of gone down since then. And now they're up a little more. A lot of more recent shootings in the past decade, the past 5 years. School shootings, Las Vegas shooting, a lot of things like that have increased sentiment for gun control. This dark blue is that the law should be kept as it is, and then this gray one here is people that want the laws less strict. And as you can see by these numbers, the people who are really pro Second Amendment, who want it less strict, seem to be kind of in a minority, which is kind of surprising. I know the folks where I live are almost unanimously in favor of the laws being more strict. But anyway, my stance on this particular issue is the least popular stance of all. I feel that it's a dilemma. Now, what I mean by this, what's a dilemma? A dilemma is an issue where any decision you make is ultimately going to result in something negative. So, a famous dilemma would be what are called the train track dilemmas, where you have a train and you have a switch, and the train could go on one path or another path, and you have a switch and you're able to choose which path the train goes on. So let's say one way the train could go would be to run into a bus of kids, and then and then the other path would be for the train to go into a stadium with 40,000 people in it, and the train has dynamite on it or something like that that would make it explode. Which way do you switch the track? Would you kill the 30 kids or potentially the 40,000 people who might be adults? That's a dilemma. Anything you do is not going to be negative, or any decision you make will result in an outcome that is less than ideal. And that's the way I view gun control. It's also the way I view abortion. It's the way I view capitalism versus socialism, and a lot of other issues. Dilemmas don't fit with the American spirit, the way we view politics. And it has to do a lot with our history with issues. For instance, we have issues with slavery, issues with women's right to vote, issues with other civil rights issues like homophobia, the issue of democracy versus monarchy, and things like that. When we view history, we got to understand that a history of a people is highlighting notable incidents, or is telling a narrative that is thematic in some way. And so a lot of our errors when we look at our history is that we stop remembering that people have kind of always been people, And these incidences that kind of pop in our attention, these incidences that where we were able to see in retrospect that a certain side was clearly ignorant. For instance, the people that were pro-slavery, in retrospect, we can see that they were clearly ignorant. People that were pro-monarchy or loyal to the King of England were clearly ignorant. People that were against women's right to vote, in retrospect, we can look at them and we're clearly ignorant. So they were clearly ignorant. So when we look back on this issue, this influences the way we see politics now. And we think that every single issue is an issue where one side is just completely in the wrong, completely ignorant, and the other side is completely right. And then history is someday going to show that our position was the rational, enlightened position, and the other position was completely wrong. Gun control is not an issue where that's going to happen. And let me tell you why. Both sides are essentially correct. If you illegalize guns, it will manifest in situations, inevitably, where people are not able to have the police show up in time or listen to them in a certain situation, and they won't have a gun ready to protect themselves as a last resort. Those situations happen all the time. For instance, a friend of mine recently was talking about how her ex-husband was coming to her place and taunting her, and she would call the police and they wouldn't listen to her, or they'd kind of blow her off. If he decided to do something terribly violent and she didn't have a gun around, what would she do? I mean, she needs that last resort option. Situations like mass shootings in schools, a lot of times, it's true that those tend to happen in places where guns are banned. Airports are places that guns are banned. Schools are places that guns are banned. Coffee shops are places guns are banned. Theaters are places that guns are banned. Concerts. These mass shootings tend to keep happening in places where no one has a gun. And it can be fairly argued that in many of those situations, if there were a person there with a gun, they would have been able to stop the attack before the police had arrived, the SWAT team or whatever. So if there had been like a teacher in like a school shooting somewhere that had a gun, they could stop a mass shooting or prevent it from getting out of hand. You can fairly make that argument. On the flip side, you can also make the argument that sometimes people who do these sorts of acts are having temporary mental illnesses or are career criminals or things like that, where the ease that they were able to obtain a weapon or a firearm made the likelihood of this sort of thing happening more likely. Either because the parent had a gun in the house that they didn't really need, because the parents just like to have guns just for the heck of shooting targets or things like that. Or just to feel a little safer than they really need to feel, or something like that. And so this crazy person, is going through a temporary mental problem, and because gun laws are so lenient, they were able to obtain a firearm in easy fashion. And if the laws were more strict, they probably wouldn't have been able to do that, so you probably could have prevented the mass shooting on that basis. You also have situations where parents are keeping firearms in their home that don't really need the firearm, and children will get their hands on the guns, or the gun will be sold to somebody, or there's a family altercation that gets out of hand, and because there's a firearm in the home, it's able to become much more deadly than it would be otherwise. Those situations happen too. So my position is that either way you go, whether you legalize guns or whether you completely illegalize them, completely ban them, will result in situations where people will be killed. More so, or situations where they would die, where they wouldn't die otherwise. So what do you do in a dilemma? I guess you go for the middle ground, try to be, try to be try to put the scale toward the middle as much as you can, or make states and local places decide what's best for them. I know that gun issues in the inner city are kind of a different sort of matter than they are in rural areas. We don't deal with the same kind of gang violence here that they would deal with in the inner city. We don't have the sort of mass shooting targets that they would have in the inner city. So I think localities should decide to a certain extent what's best for them. And otherwise, we just turn the dial up toward the middle, because there's no perfect solution. There's no, either way you go, it's going to be negative. In this video, we're going to look at a couple videos by people who are on either side of the other side of the issue. Either they're pro gun control or they're completely against it. Different videos. And we're going to analyze them for their propaganda elements and see to what extent they're bullshitting us or presenting false information. And I'm a good person to do this because, as I've said, I don't agree with either side on this, other than the fact that the criticism of the other side is accurate. Just that the criticism of a total gun ban by Second Amendment people is an accurate criticism, and the criticism of total firearm anarchy by pro-gun control people is an accurate criticism. But the criticism of each other is inaccurate, and their ignorance of the other stance or the ramifications of their own stance is also negative. You're not going to create a utopia either way. So let's take a look at a few videos. The first one will be, I think we're going to go with a pro-gun control video first. Okay. This is a shorter one. It's about 2 minutes. It says, How to Create a Gun-Free America in 5 Easy Steps. It's by a publisher named Reason TV.
Gun-Free America in 5 Easy Steps. For a gun-free America, the first thing you'll need is 2/3 of Congress, so elect a minimum of 67 senators and 290 representatives who are on your side. Then have them vote to propose an amendment to the Constitution which repeals Second Amendment gun rights for all Americans. Then convince the legislators of 38 states to ratify that amendment. Congratulations! The Second Amendment is now history. At this point, you've done absolutely nothing to decrease gun violence. All you've done is remove the barrier for Congress to legally act. You need to enact common sense gun reform. You can try to do what Australia did and ban all guns. That's not at all what they did, but whatever, fuck it, go big or go home, right? Get that law passed by Congress and signed by the president. Great, the law is passed and guns are now illegal. The only thing left to do is enforce the law. Guns don't just disappear because you passed a law. You need to confiscate over 350 million guns scattered among over 330 million Americans. Sure, you can try a buyback program like Australia, but like Australia, that will still leave behind anywhere from 60 to 80% of privately owned firearms. The rest of them, you have to take. You'll need the police, the FBI, the ATF, the National Guard, all known for their nuanced approach to potentially dangerous situations, to go door to door through 3.8 million square miles of this country and take them by force from thousands, if not millions, of well-armed individuals, many of whom would rather start a civil war than acquiesce. So inevitably, gun violence, which is currently at a historic low, will skyrocket. But that is how you get a gun-free America in 5 easy steps.
Factually, everything that video said was basically right. It is completely true, completely and utterly true, that gun violence has been reducing. The problem we have with the subject is that we're subject to what's called availability heuristic. So we look at the news, and there seems to be more incidences of mass shootings on the news. But you have to take some things into account when you're realizing this. Number one, the news has become a more efficient tool at documenting and sharing very quickly every notable event with other news outlets and getting it on, the morning news the next day or the evening news in a very quick amount of fashion. And the second thing you got to realize, and we have cameras everywhere, so they're able to give us, really good footage of every single thing that happens and get a reporter out there immediately, no matter where it happens in the entire country. The second thing that's a factor is the fact that there are more people. When you have a population increase by a drastic amount, there's going to be more incidents of everything because there's more people doing things. There are statistically more likelihoods, more incidences of people taking a crap than ever before. It doesn't mean that we're crapping more, just there are more people taking a crap. There's more people brushing their teeth likewise than ever before because there are more people. Let me look at a population increase in the United States. Give you a little bit of a view of this, an accurate understanding of that. As you can see, the population in the United States in my lifetime, I was born in the late 70s. This is what it is now. In the late 70s, the population of the United States was 200 million, and now it's 300 million. So we would expect that total incidence of everything would increase about that much because there's more people. And so there'll be more, it bleeds, it leads, whatever you want to, as far as violence and people being killed, the news wants to report every single time that happens, or any single notable time that happens. There's going to be more notable incidents of those sorts of things. So we're going to see it on the news all the time. This doesn't mean that it's necessarily increasing. What that video said was correct in the sense that gun violence has been going down. Your communities are actually safer now than they've ever been before. The likelihood that your children are going to be killed in school is minuscule. I'm not sure I'll be able to find a stat on that really quick. Likelihood that you will be shot. Assault by a firearm is the 10th most likely cause of death in the United States. The odds at 1 in 300. Well, that's kind of more than I thought it actually would be. Assault by firearm, 10th most likely. Odds of 1 in 300. That's not murder, that's just assault by a weapon. So you have a 1 in 300 chance of being shot at some point in your life. It's still not great odds. The kind of things that are more likely to kill you include heart disease, cancer, yada yada yada. Of getting shot. There have now been more than 1,000 mass shootings in the U.S. since 2013. This is in a population, though, of 300 million people. So 1,000 in a population of 300 million should not impress you that much. There's a lot of things that happen there have been a lot more than 1,000 incidences of a lot of things in that amount of time than mass shootings. What are the chances of you being in a mass shooting? I'd say pretty low. So relax about the danger. The danger is not that severe. Let's go to another video, and we're going to go through a pro gun control video. The only problem with the last one is that it was a little biased. It didn't really bring up the other side. It was just kind of like, and it did bring up an argument that I found interesting, in the sense just talking about what you would have to actually do to get rid of all the guns, because there's so many of them in a society. And it brought up what Australia tried to do.
Hi, Piper. I need you to get off my lap now because I gotta make my video. And it's hard with you sitting on my lap. But I love you. But I need to make my video.
Anyway. So here's a pro-gun control video. It's called Guns Don't Kill People. Your Argument is Wrong by the Not Adam. Let's take a look at this.
Rights versus gun control has been raging for centuries. Longer, in fact, than countries such as the United States have been in existence. But in recent years, discussion surrounding this issue seems to have reached a bit of a stalemate. One that only becomes more apparent in the wake of shootings such as Aurora, Colorado, and Sandy Hook Elementary School. One side advocates for stricter gun control, while the other insists that the only way to combat such incidents is an even greater presence of firearms. Often repeating such platitudes as, the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, and guns don't kill people, people kill people. To those who subscribe to such sayings, including and especially organizations such as the NRA, allow me to introduce myself. My name is RJ Aguiar, and I'm here to tell you why your argument is wrong. So let's see if we can do away with some of the fallacies that have been plaguing this debate for far too long. First off, guns don't kill people. Another version of the slogan I've heard is this: blaming a shooting on the gun is like blaming a pencil for a writing mistake. That is to say that a gun on its own is harmless, and only is harmful when in the hands of the wrong person. But the simple truth is this: whether it's in someone's hand or not, a gun is a weapon. Certain weapons, such as a knife or an axe or a law school trophy, have other primary purposes, such as cutting food, chopping down trees, or exempting yourself from one of Professor Keating's exams. Unlike these other weapons, a gun's first and foremost purpose is to cause harm to a target, be it an object, an animal, or another person. And none of these other weapons can match a firearm when it comes to its ability to deal a great amount of damage to one or several targets in a relatively short span of time, and even from a great distance. Very few weapons out there have a greater capacity to deal widespread damage, such as a bomb or a chemical weapon. And guess what? It is illegal for someone to purchase, possess, or make any of those other weapons. Furthermore, a gun does not have to be in the hands of a bad guy, which is such a subjective term anyway, in order to cause damage. It can cause damage regardless of who handles it, and can do so without the handler even intending for it to go off. Incidents such as that are known as negligent or unintentional discharges, and they claimed 851 lives in the United States in 2011 alone. And that number doesn't factor in the number of people who are injured in such incidents. But still, a gun can't do harm to anyone just sitting there, right? Actually, the simple presence of a gun makes it 3 times more likely that a member of that household will be murdered, especially when there is a dispute between intimate partners or family members. As a matter of fact, if and when you buy a gun, that gun is 43 times more likely to shoot you or someone that you know than it is to shoot an intruder. But even then, how is that the gun's fault? The simple fact that it's there causes people to gravitate towards more aggressive behavior. It's called priming, and it works even if the gun is imaginary. Because of the many associations that we have with guns, simply exposing people to words like gun or bullet makes them more likely to exhibit aggressive behavior immediately thereafter. This effect was first documented in a famous paper in 1986 and has been confirmed over and over by multiple studies ever since. Next is the oft-repeated phrase, the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Another version of this that I've heard is, if you outlaw guns, then only outlaws will have guns. In other words, creating stricter gun control laws will actually put more people at risk, because criminals don't follow laws, and will simply obtain firearms anyway while the rest of us are defenseless. Except that's not the case. Just ask anyone from the city of Vancouver. A famous study compared the cities of Vancouver and Seattle, both of which are very similar in terms of demographics, and both had near identical rates when it came to crimes such as robbery and burglary. The main difference is that Vancouver enacted stricter gun control laws while Seattle did not. And as a result, the case study illustrated how Seattle's homicide rate was 60% higher than Vancouver's. Not to mention the fact that, while both cities had similar rates of crimes like assault, those assaults were substantially deadlier in Seattle, due to the fact that guns were used 7 times as often. Now let's look at things on a more international level. When compared to other high-income countries, homicide rates in the United States are 6.9 times higher, and that statistic is due almost entirely to the fact that our firearm homicide rate is 19.5 times higher. Another study conducted in 2013
Okay, the only issue I've had with what he's said so far, he's saying it's due to the fact that the gun deaths are higher. That's not due to anything. That's not telling me why that's happening. It's just saying that this part of the statistic is a higher part of the statistic than it is in other places. So that's a very flawed statement he made. It's due to the fact. He doesn't know what it's due to. That's not analyzing the psychological factors and the personal factors that actually contribute to those rapid gun deaths.
Found a very significant positive correlation to the number of guns per capita of a country and the rate of firearm-related deaths. There's a reason why many pro-gun advocates opt for catchy slogans instead of statistics. Sometimes rhetoric can more effectively sway a person's thinking than numbers. It's called reductionism. In other words, the easier something sticks in your head, the more likely it is to hang around and influence your thinking. If the glove don't fit, you must acquit. Sound familiar? There's also appeals to emotion to consider, which is something that we discussed in our previous episode. The image of a violent intruder invading your home with a weapon and then using that weapon to harm you and your loved ones, that's a very powerful image. And powerful images such as that can very easily overwhelm a person's logic and reason. One other common fallacy I see committed in this debate is the coming...
Okay, but that does happen. I mean, like in the scenario I brought up where you have a person that had a divorce and her ex-husband has been taunting her and she knows that he's hell-bent on causing some damage. What is this guy going to tell her? Well, you know, it's statistically unlikely or whatever. He's not in her situation. Everybody has their own different situations. And a lot of people legitimately are being threatened right now by someone. Legitimately are in danger by someone. You're going to tell them they can't have a firearm? Especially, you know, celebrities and people that are well known. I would hope Richard Dawkins would have a firearm with him with the kind of threats he gets.
To get our guns tactic. That is, advocates for stricter gun control want to do away with guns entirely, which would include forcing you to surrender any and all firearms that you already own. In addition to being a strong image, this is a fallacy that's known as the straw man. In other words, other than defending against your argument directly, an opponent constructs an easier version of your argument to dismantle. In truth, a vast majority of gun control advocates do not want to ban guns entirely, much less remove them from your home. Most just simply want to pull for stricter and more effective background checks.
This is an adequate response to the previous video. The previous video seemed to be just about that position, about getting rid of guns entirely. Obviously, I don't know how many people in this statistic here that are all these green people that are saying that they want gun laws more strict are actually talking about banning them entirely. I imagine that that poll would be quite different. But, yeah, so there are different nuances within gun control, pro-gun control stances. Different people that are for banning, say, assault weapons only, or banning assault weapons and handguns only, or etc. So, is it a straw man necessarily? No, because... Well, it's a straw man of the Democratic Party's position to talk about gun banning, because we know the Democratic Party as a whole or as part of their platform is not in support of banning all weapons completely or going to your house and taking your guns. Hillary Clinton wasn't for that, neither was Barack Obama. They were for restricting assault weapons and making it harder to get a handgun. So, but there are some people, obviously, who do believe in banning all guns. And if you're responding to that particular argument, then that isn't a straw man, because there are some people who literally believe that.
Harsher punishments for gun crimes, and or banning certain types of ammunition and firearms while allowing others. The simple facts are these. The United States is responsible for 80% of all firearm deaths in the developed world, including 86% of overall female firearm deaths, and 87% of all child firearm death. That equates to over 30,000 gun-related deaths per year, only about a third of which are homicides. The most common form of gun death? Believe it or not, it's actually suicide, which is a fact that a lot of gun debates leave out. You buy your gun to protect yourself from an intruder, but what happens when you need to protect yourself from yourself. But no matter how many people die every year, it doesn't change the fact that the Second Amendment affords us the right to bear arms, right? Is our collective right to gun ownership worth the cost that we pay an innocent life every single year? Is it better to act in a way that saves as many lives as possible, or are there certain rights that simply cannot be infringed upon, no matter how many may suffer as a result? If this debate is going to go anywhere, these are the questions that we need to be debating. And these were exactly the questions that were facing the country of Australia in 1996, in the wake of a mass shooting. They enacted stricter gun control laws.
Yeah, remember the previous video brought out of Australia? Now this guy is... Let's look at his slant on Australia. It probably, tell us a totally different story than the previous video was. And it probably will be mostly correct, just like the previous video was mostly correct.
As well as a federal buyback of certain firearms. And guess what? Gun crime has fallen sharply since then, and they haven't had a mass shooting since. So if the NRA and their supporters want to continue to make their case, they need to be able to counter the growing amount of evidence that indicates that stricter gun control laws lead to...
Let's take a look at that previous video really quick. He just brought up the fact that gun deaths reduced in Australia after the ban. Did the previous video even mention that? It's kind of important, wouldn't it be?
330 million Americans. Sure, you can try a buyback program like Australia, but like Australia, that will still leave behind anywhere from 60 to 80% of privately owned firearms. The rest of them, you have to take. You'll need the police, the FBI, the ATF, the National Guard, all known for their nuanced approach to potentially dangerous situations, to go door to door through 3.8 million square miles of this country and take them by force from thousands, if...
The argument made in the previous video, the how to create a gun-free America in 5 steps, about when he brings up Australia, I don't think he did mention the fact that gun-related deaths decreased, or that there hasn't been a mass shooting since then. He just seems to be saying that the actually going to door and gathering all the guns would be a new problem. Would create a new ridiculous situation. So he's not really dealing with what this gentleman in this other video here is saying as far as the actual amount of incidences decreasing.
To fewer gun deaths. Or they can just do what they've been doing and lobby Congress. That's how they managed to kill a federal bill on better background checks, despite the fact that over 90% of the general public wanted it passed. That's democracy for you. Once again, if you have something substantial to add, you can duke it out in the comments with everybody else below. Just be sure to keep to the commandments.
Yeah, we'll finish there. So, some things he said here I liked, I found interesting. There are arguments that I put forward sometimes when I'm talking about this issue. He's talking about the fact that you're more likely, if you have a gun in your home, it's more likely to be used on you than it is to protect you. So you're more likely to kill yourself with it than to actually defend against a burglar or a person coming into your house to hurt your kids. But then my other argument for that is you're only dealing with the general population there. There are people, not everyone is in the same situation, there are people who are actually being threatened by someone. It happens. And are we going to tell those people that, well, you can't have a firearm at home, just call the police? A lot of times the police blow you off, they show up. They take your little report, they write it down. Well, what are we going to do? Live outside your house? They can't live outside your house. That's just not how the police work. Police can't send you an armed guard to your home when you feel threatened. So when push comes to shove, you might have to have a firearm. It might be useful as a last resort in a situation like that. There are rare things like that that do occur. The video also, I thought, was mostly one-sided, which is, fine. We're looking at a couple of videos here. So at least the show won't be one-sided, because we're going to look at another video showing another stance. So let's look at another pro Second Amendment video.
As a mouse pad. Today, we're going to go through every single anti-gun argument and see if they have any validity to them. The first claim is that in a society like America that already has hundreds of millions of guns, the best solution is to decrease the amount of guns, making it harder to get guns. So the less guns, the better. The most extreme gun laws we have now are gun-free zones, a place where guns are not tolerated at all. And if we could debunk that, which is the most extreme gun law there is, then we could debunk gun control altogether. Gun-free zone areas show us that
It's mostly logical what he's saying, but I don't know if altogether, because you're not covering the home situation. You're not covering the situation of children getting their parents' guns when the guns aren't locked up, or people who are having a temporary mental illness and there just happens to be a gun in the home, so they're able to do something that they might not have been able to do otherwise, or buy a gun that they really easily when they couldn't have done it otherwise if there were more strict laws. So what he's about to say about places where guns are very restricted in a certain area, what actually happens in that area, is a useful argument when you're dealing with things like mass shootings. But I'm not sure about every situation.
gun laws don't work. Let me ask you a question. Where have the last shootings taken place? Oh yeah, they have all taken place at gun-free zones. So obviously the most extreme policy that you guys have doesn't even work. Let me ask you a question. If your knockout punch, aka ban, doesn't work, what makes you think your jab, aka gun control, will? Obviously, laws don't prevent killing. People being trained, armed, and ready to defend people's lives, that's what prevents killing.
This is sort of a reverse slippery slope argument, where he's saying that the more extreme measure won't work, therefore the less extreme measure won't work. It's kind of a reverse of a slippery slope. For instance, slippery slopes are often the arguments that, well, if we do X, this will lead to a more extreme thing. He's just sort of doing the reverse here, where the more extreme measure isn't going to be helpful, so the less extreme measure or the more moderate measure won't be helpful either.
Killing. Some politician somewhere scribbling on a piece of paper isn't going to change anything. What about places where gun laws are more relaxed? You know, places where guns are allowed, so non-gun-free zones. For example, a gun store. How many shootings do you think take place at a gun store? Oh yeah, it never happens. What about a gun show? Does anybody ever try to shoot up a gun show? No, because there's armed people there. If armed people being at gun shows prevents people from killing people, shouldn't we put armed security in schools? So again, more gun control equals more gun deaths. Less gun control equals less gun deaths. If somebody kicks open your door right now, this very moment.
One complaint I have about that is a gun show is not a regular staple of society. What are you saying is somewhat of a good argument? I mean, if we never have a shooting at a gun show. But I imagine that we could also select a lot of little places that there have never been shootings, or a gun shop or something like that. They're not a regular staple of a society in the way that a college would be, or a school, or an airport, or a theater, like we have theater shootings. So is really the commonality that those places have the fact that they outlaw guns? Or is the thing that they share is that they're more general staples of society, whereas a gun show is not a regular place where people are known to go in mass amounts. For instance, that the shooting of the Las Vegas shooting was a concert. Concerts are a regular event where you know there are going to be a lot of people there. So I think he's right and wrong to bring that up. And I think the argument's right and wrong, because I think, yes, a lot of situations where, like if there was a person in a school, as I said earlier, maybe a teacher or someone who was licensed to have a firearm in the school, that maybe a lot of these school shootings could have been stopped before they got out of hand, before a lot more people were shot. So it's a valid argument, but you have to bear in mind the reality that gun shows are not a common staple of society. They're not places where people are known to be in mass numbers. Not every town in America has a gun show on regular basis.
Moment, and they have a knife on them, and they come to attack you, chances are you're going to die. Why? Because it takes 20 minutes for the police to show up. Yes, that means about 99.9% of the time you're unarmed and you're actually asking to be killed by people that want to kill you. The only way to make yourself truly safer is to carry a firearm or some way of protecting yourself. And no, I don't recommend carrying a knife because I don't recommend you getting into a knife fight with somebody. I'd rather them have a knife, you have a gun. Well, guns make it easier to kill people. It also makes it easier to kill animals that would actually want to attack or hurt you. For example,
I'm not sure I really buy into that argument. I think that's kind of weak. I mean, the other person could have a gun too. You know, a lot of times people who rob houses, they would potentially avoid having a gun because if you had the gun during the robbery, it would make you get a lot more stiffer sentence. But at the same time, if he knows that he's living in a community where most people have guns, the robber might bring a gun just on the off chance that the homeowner would be trigger happy, and then, you know, it makes a bad situation worse. You know, you could have a potential shootout there. So you gotta both these guys are right. Both of these arguments that these videos I'm watching, they're both right. They're just only presenting one side of it.
Like a rabid dog or a wild animal. So having something that can actually kill something in your hands is quite useful. It's something that is required in society. Also, let's say somebody tries to rob or rape your grandma. Do you want your grandma to have a knife and get into a knife fight with this criminal? Or do you instead want her to pull out a gun and strengthen the odds of her surviving? Yes, you want guns to be powerful because the majority of people that own them are good. So you just gave the majority of good people in your society power over the criminals. Yes, there'll be one or two criminals.
But even good, okay, this was dealt with by the previous video, and I don't think that he's, if I show these two videos, this one and the previous one, back to back, I show how the previous one is actually dismantling some of the things he's saying pretty well. How do you define good people? I mean, I don't know what that is. That's a totally subjective thing. But even good people who have been mostly good their whole lives find themselves in situations where they do terrible things, when they're pushed to their limits, when they're emotionally volatile. They can have mental illnesses that are temporary. People in my family that are mostly good people have had temporary mental illnesses. It could have been worse if they had a gun in their home. My mother and my brother both had bipolar incidents, and if they had a gun in their home, maybe it would have turned out much worse. And they got over the mental illness, the mental problem, and they're fine now. So it would have been a temporary situation that could have been a permanent damage to someone if they had a gun in their home.
With guns too, but the majority outnumber the criminals 1 to 1,000. It's pretty safe to assume that the only reason someone's not breaking into your home right now is because they're afraid someone's home with a gun. If guns were banned like you want and all the good guys were disarmed, criminals would grab their guns that they haven't got rid of voluntarily, and they would take those guns and they would break into your home, and they wouldn't give a single fuck if you were home with a knife. Yes, banning guns.
Again, very one-sided. The topic, as the argument I just said with a counter argument. If you're scared that people in your community are going to have guns and you want to rob a house, usually people who rob houses are pretty desperate people. They're drug addicts or something like that. They just got to have, they need to have money right now. That's usually the more common kind of criminal these days, like that. And if he knows that everyone in a certain neighborhood is going to have a gun, he's probably more likely, and some people will think, I better have a gun just because I might get shot by a trigger-happy homeowner.
When a society has already owned guns is a bad idea because the criminals won't get rid of their guns. Why? Because they're criminals. Not obeying the law is what they...
So what they, again, you know, the previous video dealt with this fairly well. I think this guy's being a little weaker in his arguments than the previous side. Not saying that the other guy's right just because he had better arguments. But who has a freaking stamp on their forehead that says they're a criminal? Regular, normal people all the time can engage in criminal activities. Just because you have not done one in the past doesn't mean you never will. And, you know, a lot of people walking around in society right now have a criminal history. I don't know what separates a criminal from a regular person in this guy's eye. I don't know, you know, if they have a stamp or a tattoo on their forehead that says criminal. I'm not really grasping how he differentiates that in a general population of people. Can he look at a crowd of people in a stadium and say, oh, there's the criminals. Here's all the criminals are right here. And these are all the good people right here. I don't know how the hell he does that.
They fucking do. If you need proof that banning things doesn't work, look at the drug war, okay? Drugs are illegal, yet they're on every street corner still, owned by criminals. That will happen to guns if you ban guns. Only the criminals will have fucking guns. Now, is it just me, or does that sound like the worst idea ever, where only the criminals have guns? Also, let's think about it for one fucking second here. There's a drug war, and how does that work out? Does that save lives? No, the drug war actually ends up killing more people than drugs itself. So why would starting a gun war be a good idea? You're just going to make the black market even more powerful if you add guns into the mix as well as drugs. You're going to give the black market even more reason to kill innocent police officers. You're going to be increasing the gun deaths by 100-fold. Let's talk about banning.
How does he know that? I mean, we were just bringing up the issue of Australia. Did it increase the gun deaths 100-fold? The gentleman in the previous video brought up they actually decreased it. I don't know how this guy knows. He can't talk about this situation as a totally hypothetical reality when we actually do have actual situations where guns have been outlawed. And we can actually look at the statistics. So why bring up a hypothetical in your mind? That, you know, imagination of what it's going to happen. You know, studying other societies is useful. And this gentleman's not doing this. Very one-sided. And I'm not sure thinking of the matter through that well.
Banning guns again. Well, how the fuck are you going to ban 350 million guns in the United States of America? America has as many guns as it does people. What are you going to do? Break into every single person's house and try to confiscate their guns? Number one, that'll result in more deaths than all shootings combined. Number two, how the fuck are we going to pay for that? We're already $20 trillion in debt. Number three, people are going to bury their guns. Do you think we're going to have time to look in everybody's backyard and look inside of their neighbor's backyard and their family's backyard? I don't think so. What about gun-free zone signs?
All right, another complaint here. As the guy in the previous video made, it's almost like the guy in the previous video saw this one. But he was talking about the fact that they're straw manning. This video is specifically titled, the one we're looking at right here, Every Gun Control Argument Debunked. And obviously, as we just talked about, there are different gun control stances. Some people want the assault weapons ban. Some people just want the handguns ban. Some people want the delay or the ability to get the guns more restricted, just more government involvement in general checking, and not basically an outright ban. And all he's talking about here is an outright ban. But the video is supposed to talk about everything. It says every gun control argument debunked is the name of the video.
Another idea that you propose that is one of the worst ideas in the history of mankind. Making sure that everybody in that school or business is completely disarmed and ready to be mowed down. And last but not least, how do you plan on enforcing these bans? With stern letters? No, you want to use other people with guns, which defeats the point. See, you're not against guns, you just want the government to have them. See, it's not about banning guns to you, it's about monopolizing them. You're literally going, Only the biggest killer in the world should have guns. Government. The people that have killed 250 million people in acts of democide. They're the ones who should be responsible and own the guns, while everybody else is disarmed to these killers. That's a good idea.
It's a fair rebuttal. I mean, a lot of times gun control advocates are kind of basing their mentality on this weird psychology that the American general person can't be trusted as a whole, and the government can be trusted, but they abuse power all the time. Another argument he brought up was the comparison of gun control and trying to legalize drugs. A counter you can bring up for that is the fact that I can't grow guns in my backyard like I can heroin or marijuana. I can't grow heroin up here. There are places in the world where you can grow heroin. But anyway, guns are a little more difficult to smuggle also than drugs are, where you can, put drugs in someone's pocket or, and nobody would be able to know, or, you can walk through a metal detector with drugs. You can put it in some kind of little compartment in your car where, nobody will see it unless they had a drug dog or something like that. Whereas guns are a little more conspicuous. They're a little larger. They're metallic, which makes them not be able to pass through metal detectors. So they're a little easier to actually regulate than drugs are. So that comparison is fair in a sense, but also not entirely fair. We'll continue.
Now let's talk about banning high-capacity magazines. Banning high-capacity magazines doesn't work for the same reason banning guns doesn't. You ban magazines, they'd still be available illegally to anybody that has money. Just like illegal guns are available now to anybody that has money. Okay, what about background checks? You know that guy who killed 50 gays at a nightclub? He passed some of the strictest background checks imaginable for the security company he works for. And he did it in order to get the job that he had. And guess what? He passed every single one. He just lied on the test. See? Background checks don't fucking work. You may say, well, we need to make that test twice as hard. Well, he could lie twice as hard. People lie to get things that they want. This is something that happens. Also, most criminals, we're talking like 95% of them, they don't buy their fucking guns at a gun store where they would have to take a background check. They buy them illegally, off the streets, meaning any background checks, period, and all you're doing is making it harder for good guys to get guns. Also, if you think you need stricter
Again, how does he know the difference between a good guy and a bad guy? Do they have a freaking tattoo on their forehead? I'm not getting. It's one part of this guy's logic that I'm not grasping. I don't think, maybe he doesn't have enough real world experience dealing. He doesn't know people that have committed crimes. He doesn't know people who doesn't live in a community where a lot of crimes are committed. No one has a stamp on their forehead that tells you they're a criminal. Anyone can be a criminal. Anyone can. Your best friend could be a criminal. Your best friend could do some violent, horrible thing.
Background checks on to get a gun, then you've never bought a fucking gun before. Because to get a gun in the United States of America is actually hard enough. Something as simple as a domestic violence misdemeanor, yes, a misdemeanor, will prevent you from getting a gun in America. I think it's pretty safe to say background checks are already strict enough. I'd even say, as of this moment, they are too strict. Especially when you consider the fact that the criminals don't even take these damn tests. They buy their guns illegally off the streets instead. Okay, what about banning all third-party and independent sales of guns and making it so you have to buy a gun through a gun store? Well, if a criminal wants a gun, they can't get it through a gun store, so they're going to be forced to go through the black market anyways. So you're not preventing anything. What, you think just by making a law saying that you're not allowed to do something, they're not going to do it? Well, let's just make murder illegal then all these problems will be solved. Oh wait, murder is illegal, and people still kill people. Looks like laws don't fucking help.
Again, they have the issue of the Australia, which this gentleman seems to not be bringing up, and the previous two brought up. In Australia, they banned the guns, And it did decrease the amount of guns in the community. It didn't eliminate them entirely, but there was a decrease. His bringing up of this hypothetical situation where it has no effect at all on the amount of guns is actually incorrect. It does decrease the amount of guns and seems to decrease the amount of total gun deaths.
I said earlier in the video, the only way to truly prevent murder is to be ready to defend yourself against those who would want to murder you. And that requires to be armed in some capacity. That's what's going to prevent murder. And that's the only thing that's going to prevent murder. Laws won't do it.
Well, there's other things too. The only thing to prevent murder. I mean, you can prevent murder by being nice to people, psychological health awareness, paying attention to someone who's having, a little bit of a difficult time, not letting people out jail or prison before they're ready to get out who have a history of violence, and putting them out back on the streets. That's a way too. There's a lot of ways, not just having everyone have a gun. And you're going to have some murders. Some murders are going to be more likely in that scenario. I mean, as other people brought up, you're more likely to kill yourself if you have a gun in your house than you are otherwise. Your domestic argument with your partner is more likely to turn violent if you have a gun in the house. So the previous video is bringing up some things he's not bringing up here.
Okay, what haven't I debunked yet? Gun registration, okay? Gun registration.
Plenty of things. I think you should watch the previous video.
Registration is a bad idea because that leads to gun banning. And that's not a good idea. And I've already explained numerous reasons why that is. Alright, what about the ban on assault rifles? When the average Joe says they want to ban assault rifles, they just mean they want to ban fully automatic guns. But what they don't know is the manufacture of fully automatic guns has been banned for a long time. Living in the United States and getting your hand on a fully automatic gun when the manufacture of them has been banned is extremely tough.
Whoa, wait a second here. You are contradicting yourself. You were just saying that anyone can get a gun, no matter, any law that you could put in place would not affect anyone getting a gun. Now you're saying that we banned automatic weapons and they're hard to get. That's a contradiction, sir. I'm not saying, now again, I still think this is a dilemma. I mean, if you ban guns outright, I still think that will lead a lot of people being killed that wouldn't have been killed otherwise, and people not being able to protect themselves. But what he's saying here is a contradiction and a half. He was just saying it has no effect whatsoever, the laws, on having people have guns. And now now he's turning right around and saying that more people, that it's very hard to get an assault weapon or a fully automatic weapon, and they're legal, and the legalization's making them hard to get your hands on them. That's a contradiction.
Extremely expensive, around 20 grand. They are highly restricted, and they're rare as well. What politicians have done is purposely redefine what assault rifle means to instead mean any gun that's semi-automatic and scary with a detachable magazine. Why? To fool the majority of people thinking that they're banning fully automatic guns into banning semi-automatic guns, which again is 90% of all guns. So just know, when politicians say, hey, we're going to ban assault rifles, they mean semi-automatic guns.
Another contradiction here with this guy. I have some issues with some of the things he's saying here. Not to say again that I am, a pro-gun control guy. Again, I treat it as a dilemma. I'm a middle ground kind of guy. But I don't think he's being as good in his presentation here or as fair-minded as the other guy was. What was I about to say? Lost my train of thought. I'll have to watch a little bit of this again.
Assault rifles, they mean semi-automatic guns. They mean 90% of all guns. They do not mean fully automatic guns.
Okay. The semi-automatic guns he's talking about, though, have no practical use as far as defending your home. Having a person invade your home, you're not going to have any better luck taking care of him with a semi-automatic gun as you will a handgun. From what I understand, what they've said is that the best gun for home defense is a shotgun. And some people have argued with me about this, but experts agree with me. If you look up experts that talk about the best weapons for home defense, number one, it's the shotgun, because in the dark, it's so big that an intruder can see from any angle what you have in your hand. And the cocking sound is just, it's one of these distinguishable sounds that you know what it is. And the fact that the shot, because it spreads out the way it is, very hard to miss you. And it's a very low likelihood that it'll be like an automatic, like you're dead kind of thing. Like if you got, shot with, a Glock in the head. A shotgun's a more likely thing to maim you than another weapon, so it's a little scarier. If a person was shooting a Glock, pointing a Glock at me versus putting a shotgun at me, I'd be more scared of the shotgun. Even an automatic weapon, I'd be more scared of the shotgun than I would the automatic weapon. But at the same time, the shotgun would be a useful gun for like a mass shooting, really. I mean, you got to put when you shoot two people and then put the cartridge, or what do you call them? I don't know, call the shot cartridge in. It wouldn't be a very good weapon for like a mass shooting. So that's actually the better home defense weapon. So you can't, a semi-automatic handgun isn't a useful gun for hunting either, even the guns he's talking about. So people that are against those particular guns, yes, they aren't technically, like military grade weapons, but they don't have the same practical uses that these other guns we're talking about are. They're not guns that you can carry around, If you're having one to defend a certain area, what are you going to walk around with this big thing? No, you have a holster, because you're not allowed to, even when you're allowed to have open carry laws, you're not allowed to freaking walk around with the gun out all the time. You have to put it in a holster, and you can't do that with a semi-automatic weapon.
You know what would be left after that, right? Powerful hunting rifles. We're talking about a hunting rifle with large-ass bullets that can kill you from 700 yards away. Bullets that are way more powerful than what AR-15s have, which shoot tiny little bullets at only 300 yards away. You know that the dreaded AR-15 isn't even designed to kill, right? It's designed to injure people on the battlefield. So with one bullet, you take out two people. You take out the person that you shot, plus you're taking another guy out because some guy has to help the person that got shot. Yes, you want to ban a gun that is designed just to injure humans and replace it with a gun that is designed to destroy large animals from a ridiculously far distance. I don't know why that appeals to somebody that fears guns. I know that you'll be safe either way, but your gun-fearing ass probably wouldn't think that's a good idea. Also, everything I just...
Again, that just seems to be a little bit of a logistics difference between, the gun he's talking about being legal because it's a hunting rifle, and the semi-automatic weapon that he says is made to maim people. To me, the difference there is just a matter of, I guess, people researching and kind of seeing the difference and whether one's a little more dangerous than the other. I don't think it disputes the entire argument that assault weapons have no practical use, because I'm really sure they do have a practical use in society.
Just mentioned is the best case scenario if everything works the way you planned and no one can get their hands on semi-autos anymore. But guess what? That won't happen. Semi-autos will still be available on the black market. Only difference is only criminals will be able to have them.
He's contradicting himself. He just went through this whole thing about how the fact that fully automatic weapons, the military grade fully automatic weapons, are extremely hard to get by because they're banned. And now he's turning around and saying that if you ban semi-automatic weapons, they'll be just as easy to get as before. That's a contradiction.
Good guys won't. It's funny. You're afraid of AR-15s and AK-47s and guns of the like, but what do? Oh, let's take them from the good guys and give them to the bad guys.
The tattoo
That'll
saying bad
fix
guy on
society.
their forehead. That'll get 'em. No, we
You
know
know
all
what
the
else
bad
is
guys. You can
stupid?
see 'em on
The
forehead.
thought that guns lead to more deaths. The thing is, if someone wants to kill someone, they're not going to stop killing someone just because they don't have a gun. They'll probably find something like a knife or something even more dangerous like homemade explosive.
You're not analyzing every situation. There's a lot of situations, than this one situation you're talking about somebody determined to kill somebody else. You have situations like, a person having a temporary mental illness and they're mad, they got fired from their job and they're depressed and they want to go shoot up everybody at the work, or this girl just broke up with me and I'm going, I've had a breakup where a girl dumped me and I was emotionally and catatonic and made some really stupid decisions. I even committed a violent crime in that situation. It'd have been terrible if I had a gun in my home in that situation. Just terrible. People have, they go through emotionally distressful temporary situations, people fighting, domestic violence situations. They can get out of control with a gun. He's not analyzing every situation. He's being kind of caricature-esque in his analysis of the situations where guns are involved. They're not all cut and dry. They're not all one kind of situation.
Or poison. Also, no one who is sane is going to go on a mass killing spree just because they buy or find a gun somehow. To assume it does is to think that guns are fucking demons that possess the mind that turn innocent people into psychotic killers.
This is a straw man. He's saying that you get a gun and then you become crazy. I mean, you can become you can have a temporary psychiatric problem. A lot of these shootings have been by people that have had temporary psychiatric problems. So they're having a temporary psychiatric problem, they're having a temporary emotional issue, and in that state of mind, they were able to purchase the gun. It's a total straw man to think that is saying that they have a gun and so they go crazy when they have the gun. That's not what they're saying.
Which is absolutely ridiculous and doesn't happen. But a lot of people have that mindset. They truly believe if guns didn't exist, there would be less deaths. Meaning, one way or the other, that gun is turning its owner into a killer. Which is an absolutely absurd belief. I think we did it, boys, girls, and those who sexually identify as attack helicopters. We've debunked every single gun control argument there is. Remember to smash that like button, and if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button. Also, remember to donate to my Patreon. If every one of my fans donated $1, I would be able to do this full time, 3 times over. But as of right now, I'm making well under $200 a month. So please consider donating. The link to the Patreon to donate is in the description box. Thank you. Catch you on the next episode.
I'm not impressed, and I'm not really feel sorry for you due to only make $200. You're not even using a camera. You didn't put a lot of work into that video, dude.
Hey YouTube, what's going on?
I'm not impressed, and I'm not gonna give you money. I don't make any money on my videos. I have if I'm lucky, I get 5 viewers at this point. So I don't really feel bad for you. That video I wasn't impressed with. As you saw along the way, I was critical of a lot of the things he said. There was a lot of propaganda in the video. I'm not saying the entire video was propaganda, but there was propaganda because there was some intellectual dishonesty and some intellectual dishonest presentation of the facts in that particular video, as you can see as I went through it. Again, I'm not saying that I'm entirely on the gun control side when you're seeing me say that, when you see me only going after that one video and being a little lenient on the pro-gun control video. It's just that particular YouTuber was not being fair in his analysis of the facts. He was not going over a lot of the things that the previous one was. Let's look at one more anti-gun control, pro-gun control, I'm sorry, one more pro-gun control video. This is by a gentleman, well, the video is from SourceFed. I don't know if that's the YouTuber's name that we're seeing on here. His name is Matt Lieberman, and we'll listen to him.
Guns. Our founding fathers won our independence with guns, and for the 246 years that our nation has existed, Americans have fed our families and protected our homes by using guns. When confronted with the tragic realities of how people abuse guns on our shores to commit violent acts and claim innocent lives, the debate erupts once again over what some consider to be an intrinsically American pursuit: the ownership and use of guns, the right to bear arms as outlined in the Second Amendment of our Bill of Rights. If you've never heard the actual amendment before, it reads like this: a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, the language of this has often been debated, and while advocates for gun ownership insist that the amendment cannot and should not ever be changed, the Supreme Court actually ruled that the amendment is speaking about the collective rights of a state to defend itself against outsiders or even the national government back in 1939. They determined that the well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state is the key phrase here, and that the amendment offered no protection of individual rights to bear arms at all. That is until 2008, when the Supreme Court ruled that Washington, D.C.'s handgun ban was unconstitutional under the Second Amendment and restored individual rights to firearms in a 5-4 decision. This was strengthened again in 2010 when the Supreme Court ruled that Chicago's handgun ban was deemed unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment in another 5-4 decision. Our right to individually keep and use firearms is the strongest that it's ever been in American history. And maybe it should be. Yes, there are more mass shootings now than ever, but that's because the world is more dangerous, and the only way to protect ourselves from that violence is by having guns of
What he's saying is false. The world is not more dangerous. As I talked earlier, the amount of shootings have decreased. There's fewer gun deaths than ever. He's again bringing up subjects to he's subject to availability heuristic. There's more incidents on the news because there are more people. I brought that up when this video first began. The world is not more dangerous. Bull crap. Bull crap.
of our own, right? We hear this idea a lot, the idea of a good guy with a gun who could have stopped violent crimes in their tracks, and that having guns in the home deters potential robbery and violence. This time last year, according to a Gallup poll, 63% of Americans believed that having a gun in the home made their homes safer. However, this idea simply isn't true. A study from the Boston Children's Hospital and the Harvard School of Public Health used CDC survey data on gun ownership from 2001, 2002, and 2004, the only years that they've ever been allowed to study the topic. What the researchers found was that the states with the lowest rates of gun ownership, like Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New York, California, Hawaii, New Jersey, Maryland, and Illinois, all had significantly lower rates of firearm-related assault, firearm-related homicide, and overall homicide than other states, while states with the most gun ownership, like Wyoming, Idaho, Arkansas, and Arizona, had 6.8 times as many firearm assaults, 2.8 times as many gun-related deaths, and twice as many murders overall as the states with the fewest guns in them. Wait, you may be saying. Lieberman, how can Illinois have lower gun deaths than other states? Chicago has some of the strongest gun control laws in the country, and yet they have some of the highest murder and violent crime rates in the U.S. Obviously, gun control doesn't work. Here's the thing, it's not that cut and dry. This isn't a 2 + 2 = 4 situation, it's a solve for X situation, and X is a product of the police's inability to curb the city's gang violence in the midst of a massive depopulation. The Chicago police force is incredibly underfunded.
I don't think he's being as fair there. You know, now, he's talking about the statistical anomaly in Chicago. And he's coming up with all these alternative explanations to explain that. But then in the stat he was talking about, where for his position, where he's talking about all these different cities have more restrictions and have more gun deaths, why isn't he thinking about, or less gun deaths, why isn't he thinking about other factors there? I mean, there are a lot of things that contribute to a place being more violent. As Michael Moore brought up, but didn't delve on enough, and Bowling for Columbine, there are plenty of places in this world that have total legalization of guns. Why aren't they shooting people as much as the United States? There's something about the character of a culture that do have a factor in this. And obviously, America is not one culture. So we could say that the factors that would make a certain civilization or a certain community or a certain town or a certain state, the elements of the character of those people that would make them more likely to have less gun laws or be more opposed to gun control could be some of the same characters, some of the same personality elements of the people there that would make them more likely to engage in a shooting. So you can't say that it's necessarily, so what that is an effect relationship instead of a cause effect, where I'm saying that both the incidences of shooting and the likelihood of them having less gun control are caused by the same personality characteristics in people, instead of saying that the less likelihood of that the restrictor gun laws are causing less shooting. It's called an effect relationship instead of a cause-effect relationship.
2013, it was widely reported that the Chicago PD has about 1,000 fewer officers than it needs to enforce the law effectively, and had key anti-gang initiatives like their anti-gang task force disbanded by Mayor Rahm Emanuel. In addition, depopulation has led to losses of working and middle-class jobs in the city, causing desperation and more potential for crime. While it is more difficult to legally acquire a gun in Chicago, it's not that difficult to, say, cross state lines to Wisconsin, a state with some of the loosest gun laws on the record, and bring them home to the Windy City. To say that gun control doesn't work at all because of the so-called Chicago argument is simply not true. However, at the end of the day, isn't the Second...
I like him bringing this up because the Chicago argument, yes, it's used a lot, and I do like him debunking that. But I'm not sure he was debunking his own argument there previously about the other cities. I don't think he was thinking about other factors there, but only thinking about alternative factors when we're talking about Chicago.
Amendment on the books so that we can defend ourselves against our government should they infringe upon our rights. Without guns, we're defenseless if Washington turns on us. Yes, that is inherently true. But the U.S. military spent $598.5 billion last year alone. No matter what kind of private arsenal a civilian can accrue, no matter what level of training they can acquire, a civilian or a group of civilians cannot effectively defend themselves against a government that can drone strike them into oblivion. The federal government has 7,000 drones in their arsenal, with Predator and Reaper drones that cost $2,500 to $3,000 per hour to fly. And the 2016 budget for federal drone research and production is some $2.9 billion. The fact is, if there was ever a war between our well-armed militia and the US government, we already lost. And to oppose legislation that could prevent another Orlando, Newtown, Charlotte, or Sandy Hook on those grounds is frankly as ill-informed as it is irresponsible. Guns are the American business.
Okay. Armed uprisings mean people of communities are successful sometimes. Dictators are overthrown because people have been able to amass armies to fight them. The idea that the government is an insurmountable force because they have more technology is not true. Regular militias and people that are forming their own covert operations to overthrow governments can get funding. There are some rich people among the general populations. They can get external funding from other countries that are sympathetic to their cause. We did it ourselves in funding other countries that were fighting against their government. And the fact that those people, those individuals that lived in that country had firearms, made them much more likely to be successful in that attack. His analysis there is not bringing up a lot of factors that have to do with defending against the government or rogue government. And a government is going to be less likely to want to do that if the people are armed, if the people aren't going to fight back. Whether or not they're going to be successful ultimately is a different matter than whether they want to take the risk of losing X number of troops in the middle of the fight. Just because they'll ultimately win wouldn't make that. See, if you're going to talk about fighting somebody, the government's going to decide we're going to fight these certain people and fight them. They're still going to be less likely to do it if they know that they're going to suffer casualties in mass numbers, even if they still will think they'll ultimately win. Winning in a fight or a battle isn't necessarily desirable if you lose a lot of people, if the people fight back. And if you can just do it without them fighting back and just say, well, yeah, we're going to go and oppress you in some way, then you're going to be more likely to do that than if you think there's going to be some kind of opposition. That was really, really awkward to say. Anyway, let's continue.
According to PolitiFact, as of 2013, it was estimated that there are over 50,000 licensed gun sellers and retailers in the United States. That includes gun stores, large retailers such as Walmart that sell guns in certain locations, pawn shops that sell guns, and individuals licensed to sell guns at gun shows. That's 1,000 places to buy a gun for each of our 50 states, or for each of the victims in the Orlando shooting this past Sunday. For scale, that's about the number of McDonald's restaurants, Subway restaurants, and Starbucks locations in the United States combined. You know that old joke about a Starbucks across the street from a Starbucks? This is like a gun dealer across from a gun dealer next to a gun dealer inside of a gun store inside of a Walmart that sells guns. Now, it's hard to determine how many of those 50,000 are year-round gun stores versus pawnbrokers, large businesses, or private sellers. Neither the U.S. Census Bureau nor the U.S. Chamber of Commerce keep data on gun stores. However, Andrew Mulchan, the president of the Professional Gun Retailers Association, told PolitiFact in 2013 that he thought 25,000 of the 50,000 are businesses that sell guns, while the other half were private sellers. That's still about 2,000 more gun retailing businesses than Subway's over 23,000 locations in the United States. A lot of liberals blame the size and unchecked nature of the American gun business on the National Rifle Association, or NRA. They claim that the NRA spends insane amounts of money convincing politicians to vote for looser gun laws. And while this practice does exist, the numbers are more tame than some would have you believe. In 2014, the NRA donated $809,462 to federal candidates and campaign contributions, and spent $14.3 million in marketing for pro-gun candidates and against anti-gun candidates. That's a lot of money, but certainly a far cry from the conspiracy-level millions and billions that some would claim. Has anyone asked you recently how much money taxpayers shell out annually because of gun sales and gun violence? Business Insider broke down a Mother Jones report last April, which revealed that gun violence costs American taxpayers $229 billion a year, or about $700 per person, and they call that a conservative estimate. For reference, that's about $12.8 million a day, every day. 87% of federal costs that stem from gun violence fall on taxpayers, mostly medical costs of shooting victims. On average, each gun-related injury in the U.S. costs $583,000 in hospitalization alone. For reference, the Orlando nightclub massacre was only one of 43 reported shootings in the United States on Sunday. For each victim that goes to the hospital, they pay, and we pay. In addition, we pay $5.2 billion a year in prison costs for people who commit gun-related crimes, and we've paid $811 million total on better school security since Columbine in the 1990s. At the end of the day, when confronted with the prospect of having fewer guns and potentially being defenseless, we have to consider whether or not gun control would actually make us safer. If it can be proved, as we did earlier, that having more guns in states like Arkansas, Arizona, and Wyoming makes them less safe instead of more safe, can it also be proved that having fewer guns out there makes it less likely that people will feel that they need one to defend themselves?
Again, how does he know that those statistics are, that they're cause and effect relationships? It very well could be that people who are against, people in a community who is overall against gun regulation is also a community that's more likely to shoot each other. Didn't mean that the gun law made people less likely to shoot each other.
Australia has had success by ratifying a ban on automatic weapons, with no mass shootings at all since the ban was implemented in 1996. In fact, the rate of gun deaths in Australia today is 1 in 100,000 per year. At the end of 2015, the rate of gun deaths in America was 1 in 24,640, more than 4 times as likely. Recently, a reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer was able to buy an AR-15, the same rifle used in the shootings in Orlando, Newtown Elementary, Aurora, Colorado, San Bernardino, and Umpqua Community College. She bought it in just 7 minutes for $759.99 at a Philadelphia gun shop where it was on display as the gun of the week. The AR-15 is referred to as America's rifle by the NRA.
I don't like that. Yeah, that we shouldn't have a situation where people are allowed to do that. What if she was crazy? What would she need that gun that quickly for? If she wasn't a wacko, a whack job.
The AR-15, which can shoot 45 bullets per minute, is legal, costs about as much as a 60-inch TV, and takes about the same amount of time and effort to purchase. However you feel about the right to own a weapon, maybe this one gun is one that we can live without. Ronald Reagan, one of the most celebrated conservative presidents in history, supported the 1994 ban on assault weapons in America. Can we today ban just one gun? Not all guns. This one. It's a start. You can click the link in the description below to find a petition to ban the...
That video, I think, was generally fair. Again, with the previous video, I thought that there were some things that were biased, kind of one-sided. But anyways, you can see, I think that there are good arguments either way. And so my stance, because I think it's a dilemma or an issue where either way you go with the law, you're going to have people that are more likely to be killed in this situation or in that situation. So what's the right solution? I say the solution is somewhat of a middle ground. Let localities decide what's best for the localities. And I'm sorry, in life, sometimes people murder each other. And hopefully we can reduce that as much as we can, but I'm not really sure that any really crazy hardcore gun stance either way is going to make a really lasting difference. Arm everybody, it's not going to stop it. Arm nobody or legalize guns, it's not going to stop it either. In life, people kill each other sometimes. Most of us don't. Most of us are good people. But you can't differentiate the good from the bad. We don't have the stamp on our forehead that shows that we're good. And we're going a little long on this video because obviously it's a kind of a complicated issue, but at least I did the wise thing and not having myself talk about the complicated issue the whole time. It would have been a little bit, it would have been a clusterfuck with my horrible oratory skills to go through this on my own. But anyway, I'm glad you watched my video. I hope you learned something, if not from me, but from the people I was presenting, the other videos I was presenting. And subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of this, whatever this is. And thanks for watching.